Welcome back, viewers and listeners, to yet another episode of Dudes of the Dead podcast, 80s edition. Yes, we're about halfway through our 80s season, and today we're bringing you an absolute classic. But before we jump into our main event, we are, as always, going to start with our quick cuts. And would you like to kick us off with your quick cut for the week?
I would like to kick us off. So my quick cut is 2023's Nefarious, an hour and 37 minutes. So this is a really interesting 6.4 on IMDb.
Okay.
96% for audience
Okay.
on Rotten Tomatoes, 35%
Oh, wow.
for critics.
That's super interesting.
So I've never seen a gap that big on Rotten Tomatoes.
No, and often the gap is the critics appreciate it,
Yeah.
but the audience doesn't get into
so this
it.
is the opposite.
It's very rare to see it the other way around.
So directed by Chuck Konzelman and Carrie Solomon, Sean Patrick Flannery, I wonder if he's Irish, and Jordan Belfi are the two stars.
Oh, he's from Boondock Saints.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I know that name.
So on the day of his scheduled execution, a convicted serial killer gets a psychiatric evaluation during which he claims he is a demon, and further claims that before their time is over, the psychiatrist will commit 3 murders of his own. So I chose this one, or I did this one. I think it's better than the 35% critic score, but I think I understand why they did it. This is, other than a few scenes, it's almost a play. It's 2 guys in a room.
Okay, yep.
So the psychiatrist and the convicted killer. And it goes from there.
But you might think that's something critics would appreciate, but audience wouldn't like.
Yeah,
so it's still
exactly.
interesting that it's inverted that way.
So I would suggest ignore the critic score. I mean, 6.4 is respectable. 96% is good.
That's very good.
And I do have, I'm cheating.
Was the acting bad or?
No, I thought it was well done. And there wasn't anything cheesy about the demon thing, or like there was nothing like that.
I'm intrigued to watch this now just based on
That's
that
right.
alone.
There you go. So I'm going to do a cheat, and I'm going to take a page out of your book. I'm going to do an extra one here.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
2 quick cuts in one episode?
Well, this isn't really a quick cut. I just want to do a shout out.
All right.
So this is a shout out to my fellow readers. I just discovered a podcast called Talking Scared. And the first one I listened to was with director Scott Derrickson. He's got the new movie, The Gorge, with Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy.
Mm-hmm.
And he did Black Phone, Exorcism of Emily Rose, and Sinister.
Yep.
So I would highly recommend this podcast. I mean, if you're a reader, he goes into a lot of detail about Emily Rose. And I just think his thoughts are really interesting. I think it's worth considering.
Well, that's the perfect segue into my quick cut.
There you go.
Which is The Gorge from
Oh, nice.
2025,
I haven't seen
directed
it.
by Scott Derrickson.
Excellent.
That's so funny that played out that way. Yeah, so The Gorge is a 2025 science fiction romantic action horror film directed by Scott Derrickson, who directed Doctor Strange and Emily Rose, as you
Yes.
mentioned. He was the producer, I think, for Sinister and
writer, I think, maybe?
yeah, didn't direct it, but
Okay.
he's still associated with those
Yeah.
titles. Yeah. So the story centers on 2 elite snipers, Levi Kane, played by Miles Teller, and Drossa by Anya Taylor-Joy, assigned to guard opposite sides of a deep, mysterious gorge. And despite strict orders to avoid contact, they develop a bond while defending against unseen threats emerging from the chasm. And as they uncover the gorge's dark secret, their relationship and survival are put to the test. So this, have you seen this one?
No, I have it queued up, but I haven't watched it yet.
I presume that podcast interview with him probably made you want to watch it.
Yes.
Yeah. So it has a 63% critic score and a 77% audience score. So a lot closer together than the one you chose. So, Dawn of the Dead, the remake, there's a few scenes that really stood out for me where it's Ving Rhames' character on the roof. And there's, I think the character's name is Andy on the other roof.
Yes.
And they're like talking to each other and they're playing chess. So take those sequences and make that into a movie. And that's kind of what you have with The Gorge.
Interesting.
So you have 2 characters who are too far away from each other to talk, but they find other ways to communicate with each other. And so I almost wondered if that scene in Dawn of the Dead was the inspiration for this film, because I would argue they blatantly actually take some elements from Dawn of the Dead, but it's old enough that I guess they can get away with that.
Because I wondered what the reference to the gorge was and how it fit in.
Yeah,
so that's cool.
So obviously don't want to spoil anything, but a very interesting blend of genres. You've got some comedy, some action, some romance, some horror. Um, it's kind of just a cool, fun film. I don't think it takes itself too seriously.
Okay.
It's pretty over the top in a lot of ways, but Anya Taylor-Joy is always really good.
Yeah.
So the performances are good. It's kind of just a fun turn off your brain and just enjoy
Does the
it.
genre lean one way or another, or is it pretty balanced in terms of the genres?
It's pretty balanced. I would say it probably leans most heavily into action,
Okay.
but there's certainly some romance in there. It's not, I don't think it's very scary.
Fair. Yeah.
So, but
Fair.
it's got enough horror, I think, to be classified as
Well, that's
horror.
cool because I did notice it and I wondered what it was about. I haven't watched a trailer or anything, but I just like, oh, that's an interesting. First of all, the casting is interesting,
Yeah.
and then I wondered about the name and so on. So yeah, that's got me curious.
So it's not amazing. I would be shocked if it's making like top 10 lists
Fair.
for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
year, but
yeah.
just like a fun movie to enjoy on a Friday night with some popcorn, you
Cool.
could do worse than The Gorge. And thanks for the setup there. That
Yeah,
worked
there
out
you
really
go.
well.
And that was not scripted, by the way. That was just serendipity. So there you go.
Serendipity
Yeah.
indeed. All right, so on to our main event. And this is a 1988 Vampire's Kiss.
How was your weekend?
It's all right, you know. It's nothing earth-shattering.
He was an ordinary guy
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
looking for an extraordinary love.
I'm Peter Lowe.
Rachel.
I brought this girl up to my place the other night.
It started with a kiss,
Really hot.
a very special kiss,
You wanted her very badly.
Yeah.
a kiss that could drive you mad.
We're both rocking our Nicolas Cage shirts. So this is described as a dark comedy horror film directed by Robert Bierman in his directorial debut. The story follows Peter Lowe, a publishing executive portrayed by the legendary Nicolas Cage. After a bizarre encounter with a woman he believes to be a vampire, he becomes convinced that he is transforming into one himself. The film also stars Maria Conchita Alonso as Alva, and that's Peter's secretary, and Jennifer Beals as Rachel, the woman he believes to be a vampire. This has a very respectable 6.1 on Internet Movie Database, an audience score of 63%, a critic score of 63%, and an audience score of 54%. So a higher critic score than audience score. So you had said that this was your number one favorite 80s film, and one of your
That
top
is
10
incorrect.
films of all time. So do you want to talk about
Wrong.
why you love this film so much? And had you seen this one before? And do you remember the circumstances that you'd seen it?
No, never seen it, and regret that I did see it.
So you're not thanking me for this one?
No, not at all. I'm gonna. You know what? I wrote a note to myself saying I do not understand the relatively high scores, and I'm gonna back that up with two critics. One said stone dead bad, incoherently bad, and another one said this movie was a stake through my heart. So I agree with those two, and we'll, I guess, hash that out as time goes on. What are we saying as spoilers for this one? Because obviously the title gives away some of the premise.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the idea that this in some way involves vampires, I think the ending would be
Okay.
something we should not spoil, and perhaps what they do with the genre might be considered a spoiler. But
Okay.
I think, we will have a spoiler section for this.
Okay.
So it's funny you say that. So I've had an interesting journey with this movie. As I was watching it, I had the thought, I think this is the worst movie I've seen in my entire life. And it was odd that it almost seemed like unclassifiable in terms of genre. I'm like,
Yeah.
there's not really any drama. It's not funny.
No.
There's no romance. It's not scary, or there's no horror. Like, it was just stuff happening. And
I think incoherently bad. That's what.
it's possible. But then apparently Christian Bale took inspiration from this film for his portrayal in American Psycho, which is interesting. And then, I started watching some stuff and seeing some parallels to American Psycho. And then once I realized what the film was kind of doing, I think there's some interesting stuff here. And someone also made the point that though it might be bad and over the top, had anyone else played this role other than Nicolas Cage, this film would be forgotten about forever.
Agreed.
But I have to give him credit. Like, this is one of his first films ever. So to do the types of things that he does in this film and to be this ballsy and bold that earlier in your career seems like it could be potentially suicidal, but it almost played off for him. How, when you search for GIFs or memes, there's like 10 that come from this movie.
Oh,
So
easily.
I get the cult following, and I get that. I think you can enjoy this film in a way that you can enjoy like The Room or Troll 2. Like, I think, does it fall into this? So, because we've watched lots of bad films that are just unwatchable. I feel like this one does maybe fall into the camp. It's like so bad that it's funny or fun to watch, but I don't know what you think about that.
I struggle with that because having seen both of those, Troll 2 and The Room, those were like egregiously bad, and it was fun to watch because it was so bad. This one, for me, didn't have that redeeming quality. It was just bad, but it didn't go over the line so bad that it was funny. It was like bad, painful. It was like, oh my God, why am I watching this? The only reason was for you. So, but I have a little, I don't know if you came across this in your research. This role was meant for Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, apparently also considered Sylvester Stallone, John Travolta,
my God.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they also offered it to Judd Nelson from Breakfast Club, but he demanded $1 million, so they just turned him down outright. But those were all names considered. But you're right, I had heard that as well. Dennis Quaid was
Arnold.
Yeah, I struggle to see that. I mean, in a way, this feels like it was made for Nicolas Cage, and I guess he was initially interested, and then he turned it down, but then he came back to it. And apparently he wanted his girlfriend to be in it. What's her name?
That's right. Patricia Arquette.
That's right.
Yeah. And he was apparently not happy that
Yes.
she didn't get in the film. Yeah.
But then he ended up liking, is it Jessica Biel? Is that what he said?
I heard that he and Jennifer Biel did not get along on set.
At first. Apparently they got better over time, but
okay.
apparently, it did not go over well. And I guess this was really messed up. He had a hard time getting into the romance scenes with her. So did you hear what they...
No.
So he requested to have hot yogurt poured over his toes during the romance scenes. And apparently that's a true story. So, I mean, I think you have to watch this movie just to see the over-the-top crazy antics. But even his voice, like the way he talks,
Yes.
it reminded me of someone doing like a Donald Trump impersonation. Like, I've heard bad Donald Trump impressions, and he talks like that the whole movie. So do you think, is this movie trying to play it straight, or do you think it's self-aware and trying to be absurd and over the top?
That is so hard to answer because I would like to think that it's self-aware, but it just seemed really bad.
Yeah.
Like, it seemed like it was a legit attempt to make this disjointed, incoherent film. And I don't think there was like a nod, wink, wink. At least I didn't feel that.
It's a straight, I mean, yeah, this film is unique. Like, I don't think I've had a viewing experience quite like this before, to the point where, yeah, I did think this is the worst movie I've seen in my life, and I've seen some bad movies.
So is that still your opinion, or have you rolled that back a little bit? And like, are you thinking, oh no, it's so good that or so bad that it's good?
I wouldn't take a strong stance, but I do think the more I watch of people's analysis of it, and the more, like, I did go back and rewatch some scenes, I think this could be watched on a so bad that it's good. Like, I think if you're into Nicolas Cage and you like his zany antics, to kind of see like the genesis of that, there's something there. And I do actually, once I realized what they were doing, I think there's some interesting ideas there, but the execution, is bizarre.
This is another. So Hal Hinson from the Washington Post described it as scorched earth acting. I was like, oh, that's a pretty good. So, okay.
But on the one hand, he makes it interesting, right? Like, if you had any other actor just playing this straight,
fair.
it would be so bad.
I'll give you that.
Like, I think any redeeming qualities that the film does have probably comes from Nicolas Cage's performance.
I would agree. And well, I would say for me, Jennifer Biel is a pretty sexy vampire. But
definitely,
but yes, in terms of, oh, okay, this is so over the top. And so coming back to your idea of, was this meant to be like legit, or was it meant to be straight? I questioned whether Cage was doing what he was doing. He's obviously doing it deliberately, but my question is, was he trying to get across the eccentricity of the character or the lunacy of the character? Like, was there a means to an end in terms of his performance?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't landed anywhere on that, but my mind was like, okay, is he doing this for a reason to try to get us somewhere down the road to understand this character? Like, I think part of my problem too with this was his character is despicable and really unlikable for
Totally.
me.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. He is.
He's a complete
despicable.
dick.
He is. But so is actually, so yeah, one of the reasons that I heard that this is successful is that he is supposed to be a complete dick, and you're not supposed to
Okay.
you're not supposed to relate to him or empathize with him or like him or find him. He's just like, this guy is a complete jackass. Whereas Christian Bale's
Yeah.
depiction in American Psycho, though he is a despicable person, he does unethical things. He does have like almost like a sexiness to him or a confidence to him
Yes.
that is respectable or that people might try to emulate.
Yeah.
Whereas no one wants to emulate Nicolas Cage's character
No.
in this film. So if his goal was to make this character so unrelatable and so despicable that no one could relate to him, I think he kind of succeeds.
That's, it's really interesting. I hadn't come across the comparison to American Psycho, but the comparison that I made in my notes was like Wall Street,
Okay, yeah.
because it's definitely like really set in that excess money 1980s
Yeah.
culture. And, he's got the paisley tie. There's casual. I mean, it's really interesting going back and seeing the casual sex and the smoking. And we've talked about this before, the TNA in the 80s
Yeah.
and stuff. It's very,
And he's abusive.
yeah, it's very of its time in terms of visually, I think.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, it reminded me of the excesses that you saw in Wall Street. But I can totally see the American Psycho.
Yeah. And it does maybe seem to be a critique of corporate culture or the types of people who
Right.
rise to those power positions and who are narcissists or they're just using
Yeah.
people. So I guess I think at first glance, or my first interaction was just like, this movie is trash. But when you start to peel back some of those layers, like, okay, maybe I can see that there was some method to the madness. But it's tricky. Because,
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, another Karen.
the fact that we're doing a podcast about this movie, whereas if anyone else had done it, I'm sure it would just be forgotten.
Oh, I don't even think, it'd be on anybody's radar. I mean,
Yeah.
another critic, so there's the scorched earth hacking. Karen James from the New York Times said that his performance was self-indulgent. And
Yeah.
so, that, and that this wouldn't be the first or only time that Cage's performance, I mean, and we've had lots of discussions about Nicolas Cage. I mean, there are times when his performances, I think, add to a film because he's so over the top that it's like, okay, that suits the character, suits the film. And there are other times where that delivery ruins it for me. And I think part of my challenge with Cage is that he's so inconsistent. It's like sometimes like you watch and you think, wow, this guy's really good.
Yeah.
And then other times it's like, have you ever acted before? Like it's just, I'm just at a loss.
But then he does do these roles sometimes where he's very good.
Yes, absolutely.
Like Pig or I don't know, he's just done lots. But this one, so where would he fall for you then in this film then?
Oh, for sure on the on one extreme, like just ridiculous. Like
So you don't think it added to the film? You feel like it detracted?
Well, I just think the film itself was bad.
Right.
I mean, and
The
not
film
just,
is bad.
not just his performance,
Yeah.
but the writing's bad. The situations are
The
bad.
writing is so bad.
Yeah. So, his performance doesn't, it detracts from the film, but the film would have been bad even if he wasn't in it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think, like, Alonzo's pretty good as an actress. I've seen her in other things.
Yeah.
But she can't overcome the bad writing.
Yeah.
And the same with Jennifer Beals, I don't think can overcome the writing. I mean,
It's hard to know how you measure the success of a
Yes.
film. Like, do you measure it by winning Academy Awards, or do you measure it by it has a cult following and it's talked
Yeah.
about decades later and it's like a pivotal, like if you're going to look at his filmography,
right.
he
right.
actually said this is his favorite role that he's played.
I'm not surprised by that. So what?
And I guess he was also given a lot of autonomy to,
Yes.
like, he improvised a lot of stuff. That whole like alphabet sequence where he says the entire
Yes.
alphabet in a very
I-
zany way was his contribution.
I think you've hit it there. with the problem with Cage's performance is if you give him too much rope, he hangs himself. Like if as a director you don't have a clear idea of what you want and you don't tell him what you want. If you give him like free reign,
Yeah.
you get this.
Yeah.
Which is just like, okay.
Were there any parts of his performance that made you laugh or smile or you found endearing, or you just thought it was ridiculous the entire way through? Or
I have to say, I did enjoy the first scene when he brings home that girl from the bar. Like
Yeah.
I thought so when it started, I had high hopes because I thought it started well.
yeah,
And he picks up that woman in the bar and he brings her home, and I thought that was a bit slapstick, but it's like, okay, if this is a comedy, I can buy into
the
this.
bat
And the bat, yeah, like there's a vampire bat in the apartment. And
chasing it around. Yeah.
I mean, that part actually had me laughing, and I thought, oh, this is a good start. And if it goes down this road, I'm going to be happy like watching this film.
Mhm.
And at some point, it just went off the rails. Like it was just, what's going on? And so a couple of things I liked. So that I liked. The fact that Nosferatu was on the television, I
Yeah.
thought was a nice nod to vampires.
Well, he actually said that kind of German expressionism was a big influence for him in Nosferatu. Like
Okay.
he has the very
Yes.
over the top expressive facial expressions, which he said he took from Nosferatu. So I guess he was
Right.
inspired by that film.
Except he lacks the subtlety of German expressionism.
Yeah.
I mean, did I read somewhere, because I put a question mark, that eating the cockroach was real?
Yeah. So apparently the original in the script, he was going to eat a raw egg.
That's right.
And he was
yeah.
like, oh, that's not extreme enough.
Yeah.
So it's his idea. And he just went for it. And he actually eats a cockroach. And then they screwed it up the first time. He had to do it a second time. So apparently he ate 2 cockroaches. And they told him to chase it with a shot of whiskey, I think they said.
Wow.
But yeah,
Oh,
he said that's like the most disgusting thing he's done in his life. But that's dedication. And I guess he did some method acting. So behind the scenes,
Yeah.
he stayed in character and he wore those like plastic teeth around. And I guess he annoyed a lot of people, which isn't surprising.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. So
But I kind of laugh like the things like taking his couch and flipping it over and turning it into a coffin was kind of funny. But I question whether this film was meant to be a comedy, because I think it's trying to have a
I think it's
serious
trying.
message
Yeah.
and trying to be a serious movie, but he's so over the top that it ends up blurring into like the Room territory.
Yes.
And it's hard to say whether this was self-aware or not. I kind of lean towards no. And it's interesting because of the Blu-ray version, Nicolas Cage and the director do a director's commentary where they
Okay,
talk
yeah.
over it. I listened to some of that. And it's just odd. Like they kind of laugh about it in hindsight.
I
But
bet
you
he
maybe
does.
got the sense that they just didn't really know what they were doing.
Yeah.
Like it sounded like they just were maybe improvising, or I don't know. We're making this movie, and I don't know how much thought they put into how they wanted it to, what the tone of the film should be.
I don't want to read too much into this or give the film too much credit, but I did have a question mark in my notes. At the very beginning, you've got this fairly long panning shot of New York City.
Mhm.
Did you get a sense that whether it was New York City or any city, that the city was almost like a character in the film? Like, did you get any sense that was...
You're right. They do put a lot of emphasis on the city. And I don't know if part of the theme is like the corrupting nature of a city like
Right.
New York, and maybe the
Yeah,
shallow
that's what I wondered.
or
Yeah.
the corporate nature of it.
Yeah.
Because even at the end, I guess, when he's going crazy and they have all the pedestrians
Yes,
reacting
yes.
to him, those are real pedestrians.
Yes, I remember I read that he had just gone out on the street and they were filming.
Yeah, and he no one knew who he was yet. So
Yeah.
I guess he actually scared a lot of people because they just thought he was nuts. So those are real pedestrians. Those aren't actors or extras.
Yeah.
So, but the fact that you're focusing on that, I think also speaks to the idea that
Yeah.
the city is kind of a character, or how he relates to other people, or how they see him.
I mean, I don't think it was necessarily successful, but I wondered if that's what they were going for.
I wonder. I could see
in the
that.
film.
Yeah.
So what were there things that you liked?
Well,
Or is like too strong a word?
like might be too strong of
Okay,
a word.
okay.
I mean, this is so. Should we get into spoilers? Because I think for me to talk about the thing, maybe I liked.
Yeah,
I
fair
would
enough.
have to spoil it. I mean, Nicolas Cage, he made it more entertaining than it would have been without him.
Okay.
If he was,
Yeah,
if
if it
he
was
played
Dennis
it straight,
Quaid, it
this
wouldn't-
film doesn't have a
yeah.
whole lot going on.
Yeah.
Like it was, Dennis Quaid probably would have been pretty boring.
Yeah.
So I appreciated Nicolas Cage's antics.
Although if we could have had Dennis Quaid eating shrimp.
Yes, I was gonna say the
Like
eating
in the
shrimp was good.
substance.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we could go into spoilers because I have a few things that are spoilers for me, for sure. So we probably get into spoilers.
Yeah, so let's get into spoilers.
Spoilers.
No, wait, before spoilers though.
Okay.
Do you recommend this film?
No, absolutely not. Do not waste your time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean it's a bad movie.
It's a hard no for me, a hard pass.
So I guess the two instances where you may want to watch this movie is if you're a vampire completionist and you like to see the different ways that vampires can be represented or what you can do within the vampire subgenre. I think this does something that's kind of unique, but we're going to talk about that in the spoiler section.
Yep.
And if you're a Nicolas Cage completionist or a fan of his work, this is where it all began.
Okay.
So I think if you have t-shirts with Nicolas Cage all over them and you're a fan, then this might be worth watching. But otherwise, there's not a whole lot of redeeming qualities.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
do you disagree?
I do, but I have a bit of a soft spot for the idea of, I think approached differently, the idea
Yes.
of someone believing that they were a it was an interesting concept.
Yes.
It was the execution of the concept that I struggled with, not the concept itself.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're talking about, because, arguably, if we come back to that comparison with American Psycho, for me anyway, the first time I saw it is like, okay, is this all in his head? Is it real?
Yes.
And so that concept worked in American Psycho. I think a similar concept is going on in this film. I just don't think it worked, and or that it was executed effectively.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that they do something interesting with the vampire.
Yeah. And the third level I might recommend it is if you love films like The Room or Troll 2 and you like the so bad they're kind of funny, or like if you like those cult following type of films, you might enjoy this one just for, Nicolas Cage has some very over the top crazy antics that people might find fun.
Right.
But it sounds like not a strong recommendation. For
Excuse me. And if I would say maybe one other level would be if you have hearing and sight issues, you might enjoy this film a lot.
Yeah. If you're blind, deaf, and dumb, then it's great.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so spoilers. Yeah. Spoilers.
So I just had an upcoming thing spoiled for me.
Okay. You can go first.
Okay, so it took me a while, I would say almost until the end of the film, where I realized that he actually is not a vampire.
Exactly.
That he just believes he's a
Yes.
vampire. And this idea of a descent into madness or a mental illness masked with this idea that you think you have this ailment or this condition, I actually think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, the concept is quite interesting.
And I don't think I've seen a film that's approached the horror subgenre that way, like using something like a ghost or a spirit or a werewolf, or in this case a vampire, as a metaphor, I guess, for madness. And so once I kind of clued, I'm like, oh, like this is all in his head.
Yeah.
And when you go back and see, like when he's looking in the mirror,
There's a reflection. Yeah.
There's a reflection, but
Yeah.
in his mind, he thinks he doesn't see a
Yes.
reflection. And at that point, it's like, okay, there is more to this film. That made me want to go back and give it some more attention. And there are instances throughout the film where they're playing with that idea, and I think that's pretty cool. I think to your point, and was it executed well? No. But I love that idea, and I think had that been executed better, this actually could have been like a pretty important film. But what do you think about that?
Well, so I guess my question, so coming back to the idea, because I did clue into the fact like, hey, he has a reflection. So with the Jennifer Beals character, I can't remember her character's name. Do you remember what it is?
Yeah, I have
really
it here
matter.
somewhere.
But so is that all in his head? Does he hook up with her?
Right.
Like that, I couldn't quite catch. Like there were things like obviously the coffin, overturned couch and stuff. That stuff I got.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure.
So one theory I heard that he did hook up with her.
Okay.
But apparently he's so used to being in control and manipulating other people that the thing that causes his mental break is the
that she's
idea
manipulating him?
that because there's that scene when he goes to meet her in the morning and he passes her coffee, but she's not there.
Yes.
So that she used him and she abandoned him.
Right.
Like he couldn't handle that lack of control, which if you're a narcissist
Yeah.
or so, yeah, I think that's kind of cool. And I think that kind of works. When you go and look at some of those little clues, that makes it more interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't take a timestamp, but I don't know. I would say that to me,
So
that's
up until that point,
yes.
yeah. And then after that, and that makes some sense.
Well, it does make sense. And actually, I didn't think it was that bad a movie up until the point where he hooks up with Jennifer Beals.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's like, okay, it kind of goes off the rails. But
And even like when they were talking about the gun having blanks, I
yes.
thought, oh, that's weird. Like, why are we putting so much emphasis on the blanks? But of course, he shoots himself. He doesn't realize that they're blanks.
Yes.
So in his mind, he thinks he survived because he's a vampire.
Yes.
So I didn't put all those things together the first time through. Although I've heard people say that if you actually fired blanks into your mouth like that, you'd still kill yourself.
Yeah.
'Cause it's
Well,
still
'cause
not
there's
good.
still
but
the gases and stuff.
So
in
don't
this
try
film.
that
Yeah, so
at
don't
home.
try. We don't recommend that.
No.
Don't try this at home. So here's a question that I wrote for myself. For you, does it work as a black comedy?
I think it does, kind
Okay.
of. Yeah. Because I think when you just go into this movie blind and you're just expecting like a weird Nicolas Cage movie, I think if I went back and watched it again now, knowing, okay, is this a black comedy?
Mhm.
Is there more commentary?
Right.
And knowing from the beginning that he's not actually a vampire, but this is all in his head, or this
Right.
is like a mental break, I might appreciate it more. And it's interesting that the critics give it a decent score, like 63%.
Yeah, that surprised me.
And a 6.1 Internet Movie Database. So maybe, do you think if you watched it through that lens, you might appreciate it more a second time through? Like, were you prepared? I wasn't prepared for any substance.
No, I was. I mean, I went in completely blind. I had seen the memes, but I had no idea. I thought it was going to be a comedy, like a
Right.
straight up comedy.
And it's not.
It's not.
No.
It's not funny. It's not scary. It's it's what it is. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the movie in its entirety. I mean, other than the fact that I didn't like it, but there are some elements that I gave it credit for, and I thought, okay, yeah, I can kind of get on board, especially because you've forced me to watch so many Nicolas Cage movies now that I kind of have a little bit of a.
My goal with this podcast was to make sure we had a Nicolas Cage film every single season, and I apologize to the audience because I failed last season. We didn't have one, but the plan going forward is to make sure we always have.
Does he have anything coming out? Like last year, he did Acadian.
He's got like 2 or 3 coming up, but I don't know if they're in the horror genre.
Okay.
But hopefully, I have confidence by the end of the year.
Because yeah, I
So,
mean, he's got usually 2 or 3 or 4 a year.
He does.
He's so prolific.
he's very prolific.
And I think from what I understand, he just likes to work.
Yeah.
It's not about money. It's not about whatever. It's just about keeping. And I have a bit of respect for that. It's like he just really likes to work, and I also respect the fact that he does a lot of indie films.
Yeah.
And that he obviously wouldn't get as big a paycheck for those kind of things. There's other things that I have less respect for.
There's a YouTube video of like the 50 crazy things that Nicolas Cage has bought, and he just buys, like, he's bought all these castles and he buys all these cars and just random animals, and I guess he just has a very strange
Random
collection of
animals.
random stuff.
Here's a great. So this is, I think his name is Brian Bassesi, and it's the Horror Movie Club podcast. And so here's a quote from him. One can't help but be interested in Cage's performance the same way one's attention is drawn to a car accident on the freeway. And that's so apt, because it's like, yeah, this is just so off the rails, and like you're looking at it going, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? Like,
Yeah.
is this really a film? And is this really how he's, performing this? So I thought that was really good, because to me, it really spoke to me about, yeah, you keep looking back going, what's he going to do next? Like, what's the next? I mean,
And the lore, like those cult films
yes.
that have this kind of like the idea that he actually ate a cockroach.
Right.
Or do you remember he's chasing the pigeons
Yes.
and he catches one? So I guess in the director's commentary, he was like, yeah, like I was
Excuse
really
me.
proud of myself. I was able to like catch that pigeon. And the director's like, we drugged them, right? He's like, no, you did. So I guess they had drugged the pigeons so that he would be able to catch one, but he didn't realize that at the time.
Is that animal cruelty?
It might be. Even the cockroaches too, I guess they got in a bit of trouble for that, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What, because he ate one?
Yeah. Animal cruelty. Even though they're like, well, everyone sprays. Do you spray Raid when you go camping?
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that. I mean, I'm struggling a little bit with that one. It's like, really?
Yeah.
He did eat it. So is it animal cruelty? And I know some of you will say yes. Is it animal cruelty to eat a steak? Some people would argue yes.
Yeah.
I mean, cockroach has got some protein.
I wonder if there's very little wiggle room in film. Like there's just the way the
Yes.
ethical rules
Yeah.
are written that I guess it is a living thing that he killed. So
Yeah. I can appreciate that.
His boohoo, the boohoo, when he was trying to actually cry in a realistic way that said boohoo. There's just so many things. The alphabet dance.
Coming back to this idea of the film possibly being a metaphor for
Mhm.
something. One of the things that I wondered, and I could see this being, I would have some appreciation for this. I had the thought that I wonder if the vampire trope is a metaphor for the 80s society blood sucking of
Totally.
you know what I mean? Like sucking the money out of people and
The life force. out of
Yes. Yeah.
especially when you look at his relationship with is it Alba, his secretary.
Yes.
Like he is just
Oh, he's
he
horrible.
is sucking
Yeah.
the life out of her.
Yeah.
Uh, funny too when she's like calling in sick and he actually goes to her house to bring her back,
Yeah.
but then berates her in
Yes.
the on the car ride back. It's just
And that's so
and that's what I think he did come to it with some of these more high-minded ideas,
right.
but the execution maybe just failed.
I think my challenge with that is if that had been played as a comedy, like if you look at was it Dabney Coleman in the old 9 to 5 film with Dolly Parton and Lily Tomlin.
Mhm.
He's a terrible boss, but it's played for laughs.
Yes.
This is not. He's just a mean, nasty, terrible person.
Yeah.
In my perspective.
No, I agree.
And I mean, he
But like in Eric Cartman in South Park, does that succeed in terms of you are not supposed to like this? Like, are you supposed to think of that type of person and that type of manipulative figure as despicable?
well, I'm sure. I guess to me though, it didn't, because it's not a drama. It didn't work on that level, and it's not a comedy because I didn't find his behavior funny.
Mhm.
Like in that 9 to 5, which I know is a really old film that probably most of you haven't seen, but in that movie, Dabney Coleman is a real terrible person and a terrible boss, but it's all played for laughs.
Yeah.
And in this case, I didn't find him funny. I found him despicable. And I know what you're saying, that maybe that was the intent.
I think that was the intent because I don't get the sense that they wanted it to be funny. Do you?
Well, if they
Maybe the
did,
bat-
they weren't successful. Well, the bat thing is funny.
But it was that the intention. It's
I sure
so
hope
hard
so.
to tell, right?
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, as an English teacher, do you see this as like a Shakespearean tragedy at all, where you have this character at the beginning who's on top of the world, has everything, has power, and then by the end he like descends into ultimately him being killed.
wow.
Um,
I mean, I see what you're saying, and yes, I could see if you go down that road, you could say, okay, well, his tragic flaw is his narcissism.
Yes,
I could see that.
because it felt unclassifiable in your traditional film genres.
Yeah.
I was like, are they almost going for like a Shakespearean tragedy formula? Because
Yeah,
those are hard to classify too sometimes.
they are. I mean, that's high-minded. And
But it seemed like maybe they were high-minded in their concept, but
right.
failed miserably in their execution. So I don't know.
I mean, I'm going to do one critic thing that was actually fairly positive.
Yeah.
Carrie Rickey from the Philadelphia Inquirer said that the movie succeeds as a wicked allegory for what men want.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay,
Power and
I could
control.
I could buy that. And yeah, I think if you transcend the writing and the performances and you start looking at concepts, I think the movie's more successful on that level
Yeah.
as an allegory.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't want to read too much into this because I don't know what the writer and director were thinking, but the end result wasn't satisfying to me in terms of a watch, but as a think, it has elements that are satisfying.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that it just takes a while. Because I think when the film starts, when you see the bat and you see her as a vampire, you just assume that he is a vampire.
Yeah.
But it's only when you kind of go back and look at all the clues that you realize that he's not. And even like vampiric projection is a power a lot of vampires have,
Yes.
right? Where they can put themselves in a space.
Yeah.
So when he's having that final therapy session,
Right.
and he's wandering around the street delirious, like the first time I watched that I think this is when I finally started to clue in, but I thought, oh, he's using like vampiric projection
Okay.
to like have this meeting,
Right,
even
right.
though he's in the street, but no, he's just fantasizing and going mad. And then when she brings in that other person
Right,
for
yeah.
him, that's exactly like him, and they have everything. Like
Yeah.
that's what he wants in a woman, who's
Yes.
someone who's exactly like him.
Yeah.
And forgiving, like, oh, it's okay that you were gonna rape her, like,
Right,
oh, it's
yeah,
okay you were
yeah,
gonna murder her.
yeah.
Like people die all the time. Like
Yeah, exactly.
the rationalization for why he did all these horrible things, I did find that kind of thought provoking. And actually, that scene in hindsight is kind of brilliant, maybe.
Yeah,
In
I
his
don't know.
performance, like when he's wandering around the street, he does look just pathetic.
He does.
Um,
I mean, I wouldn't go as far as brilliant, but I would give it its due.
yeah. And when you see people on the street who are having a manic episode
Yes,
or whatever,
yeah.
and they just look like they're crazy from the outside, but I'm sure in their own mind, what they're experiencing
100%.
is something profound. And so I feel like it kind of captured that, especially given that the pedestrians were actually pedestrians reacting to
Yeah.
him and being terrified of him. Just the other day when I was at Tim Hortons, this guy was like threatening to murder people
Yeah.
and was clearly having a psychotic episode. So it was easy to kind of laugh at or put aside, but you knew for that person it was terrifying.
Yeah. And I mean, in those real life situations, it is tragic when you're seeing
Yes.
that. And I think that's the challenge of this film, is that it doesn't present him necessarily as a tragic figure.
Yeah.
And it doesn't present him as a comic figure. And so as we're talking, one of the things that comes to my mind, and I'm not excusing this film, but I think part of my negative reaction was I came into this thinking that it was going to be a comedy like Love Bites.
Right.
And I anticipated, especially because those first few minutes set it up for me as a comedy.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, it's not a comedy, but it's not a drama, and it's not scary, and it's not. So it's like, where does this fall? Like, where does this fit in? And I think that's coming back to that critic's response about the film being incomprehensible. I don't think he's just being negative there. I think he's hitting on the fact that it doesn't land anywhere. It doesn't scare you. It doesn't make you laugh, except for minor incidents.
Yeah, for the wrong reasons.
It doesn't. It's not a drama. It's not tragic. It's so.
Is it tragic? That's the only thing I think. Maybe to me sort of follows that formula
Right,
of
right.
Shakespearean tragedy. And you were saying this is on the level of Shakespeare.
No, I didn't say that. You said that. Nice try, though. Let's be clear about that. As an English teacher and a real fan of Shakespeare, this is not Shakespearean tragedy.
Trying to see if I can get that over.
I can't believe you would even suggest that.
It's worth a try.
Oh man. Okay, so are we going to talk about the ending?
Well, yeah, so
Okay.
that's so funny that even when he has his perfect match, someone
Yes.
who's exactly like him, the second they're home in the apartment, they're getting in a fight with each other.
Yeah.
And then the guy shows up and he's like, just kill me now. And they push the stake through. So did you feel anything for him at the end, or are you just
No.
glad he was dead?
I was just glad he was dead. And it was Alba's brother.
yes.
So that made it, I mean, that was cathartic, because it's like, okay, she's just abused to no end by Cage's Peter, right?
Yeah.
His character.
Peter Lowe.
And so I was quite rejoicing in the fact that her brother offed him.
And I think
at
that's
end.
the intent, because I think they do set her up as the most
Absolute-
sympathetic.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you were meant to like find him despicable.
Yes.
So I think the audience is supposed to take some joy in his death at the end.
Yeah, I mean, whether for me it was joy, but whether it's joy or not, there's definitely a release of emotion at the end there about, okay, he got what he deserved.
And he's
arguably.
just so like he's fallen so far from the guy who's got everything on top to the point where like he's helping the guy kill him.
yeah.
Because he thinks he's a vampire. Even when he's running through the streets, I'm a vampire. Just was so ridiculous.
Can you imagine like being in New York City and having somebody like, you don't know that it's a movie or an actor or whatever, and this person saying that they're a vampire? It'd be like, what the hell's going on here?
It's a bit like Be
Like,
My
this guy
Cat.
just escape from Bellevue, or what's going on?
So if nothing else, I think the film is interesting and it's made for a good discussion. Um,
I'm actually quite surprised. I mean, I'm looking at the time, 45 minutes. I'm like, I did not think we'd get 45 minutes out of this. But to your credit, you raised some interesting ideas about the concept of the film and also possibilities of what they were trying to do, even though they weren't successful in
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah, I think the concept, and I think because it duped me, I think the reason I was like, this is the worst movie ever, is I just assumed that he was a vampire.
Right.
And then when I finally clued in that, oh, he's not actually a vampire.
Yeah.
And then I thought maybe there's more to this. And I think there conceptually was more to it. I think you were right. I think they came to this with good intentions and actually some good ideas, but then the execution failed. And this is his directorial debut, and maybe that is showing.
Right.
Especially when you're working with someone like Nicolas Cage, though he brought a lot to the role in some ways, is maybe so hard to control in other ways.
I was just going to say, if this is your directorial debut and you've got a Nicolas Cage and you don't give him direction and you allow him to improvise, this is what you're going to end up with, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, the other thing too, thinking about this, I think, again, coming back, the concept was interesting. I think if they had played it a little bit differently so that it was clearer that this was a psychotic break for him, because there are clues, the fact that he has to wear plastic vampire teeth, which was somewhat amusing. But does he take the teeth out when he kills that woman in the bar? Okay. So those are, that was actually quite a, striking scene. I didn't anticipate. It's like, oh wow, like that. It went there, and I didn't think it was going to. So yeah, I just think if it had been a little bit clearer about, okay, this is the direction that this film is heading, but I just think it was so disjointed in its tone that it made it really challenging as an audience to feel anything one way or the other about what you were watching. So.
And I think if you look at what American Psycho is doing, I can see that this is trying to maybe do something similar.
Yes.
Conceptually.
Yeah. What's the timeline then? Is this 87? When was this one?
This was 88.
Oh, okay.
88 maybe.
Yeah, 88, 89.
And
so
American Psycho was at 1990?
It's very close.
It is close by.
Yeah. So did you suggest earlier that American Psycho maybe was...
I had read that Christian Bale actually took some inspiration from
Okay.
Nicolas Cage's role in this film.
That's super interesting because I can actually see that connection now.
And they operate similarly.
Yes.
And they're portraying the same type of character.
Yes.
Christian Bale's a little more grounded perhaps, but he has some zany moments.
Oh, absolutely.
So I could actually see that maybe he did actually draw some inspiration from Cage.
For me, the difference though is that in American Psycho, there's always question about, is this reality or is this in his head? And Bale's performance, I think grounded is such a great word because his performance makes you believe or makes you think, oh, this is real. He's very in the moment. Like, the chainsaw scene and the sex scenes. And I thought those were real. Like it took me a few watchings of American Psycho to go, is this really happening?
I agree. But then by that same token, I thought that Nicolas Cage was a vampire until the end. So I also thought that was real.
Oh,
or did
really?
you not pick up on that? Or did you think he wasn't?
Oh, I got it pretty early.
Okay. So maybe,
wasn't.
Yeah.
And that's what confused me about what are they doing here? Like, it's obvious that he's not.
Yeah.
So where are they going with this story? And I, to be fair, I did not have a thought about, oh, I wonder if this is a psychotic breakdown for him. And I didn't really go there because his performance is so over the top. I didn't take it seriously. Whereas Christian Bale, I took his performance seriously,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. And I wonder though, because we're coming at this knowing who Nicolas Cage is. And I think you bring that baggage to the film
That's
a little
fair.
bit, right?
Yeah.
Because Nicolas Cage is so crazy and zany. Yeah. We've seen the memes, we've seen the GIFs, we know.
Not the bees.
So I think when you were expecting comedy, I think that's partly why. Whereas if you went into this blind, it's called Vampire's Kiss, you have no context for who Nicolas Cage is, it would probably be a very different viewing experience. So I wonder if we bring a lot of baggage to the film.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. I think if there had been a bear costume, it probably would have been a better film.
Not the bees. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of intrigued by it. It's interesting. It's interesting.
I
I would
mean,
like to watch it again, maybe with a more open mind.
let me know how that goes.
Would you watch
No,
it again now,
no,
knowing
absolutely not. No.
the American Psycho?
I'm happy to
connection
have the
and-
discussion,
Yeah,
and I've definitely, I would say
this
that
could be a
I've-
good annual tradition. We could watch this
yeah,
and
and
Wicker Man.
Wicker Man.
Back
Yeah,
to
yeah,
back.
that'd be a great double bill. At least with Wicker Man, it was so ridiculous you could laugh.
So is that what you were expecting?
Yes.
I think that's
My expectation is part of the problem here for sure.
yeah.
Because I did expect kind of like a slapstick comedy.
So is that for you to have liked this film more? Would you want them to lean more into the comedy, or would you want them to lean more into the madness and the drama and the more
One way or the
psychotic
other.
break?
I think if they had just landed somewhere and said, okay, we're trying to make this serious kind of film about a psychotic breakdown, or we're trying to make an over the top comedy, because Cage's performance lends itself to comedy, right? Because you watch him and he's a very physical, his facial expressions and in this case, his voice and so
Yeah.
on. To me, that lends itself to comedy. And so again, there's a tonal disconnect for me between what I'm seeing him do and the intent or the content of the film.
Right. But you stand by this is better than Shakespeare.
That's right. I think I've said it several times in this podcast. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I'm glad I watched it. I've been using the memes for years, so it's nice to actually finally watch the film that's associated with it.
That's true, actually, because especially that one where he's doing that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's where that comes from. Because I actually didn't know that the vampire's kiss was where where those memes came from.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, there's some Cage film that I've never seen.
Well, I'm curious to see if this shows up in your top 10 of 80s list that we do at the end of the season.
It's a hot contender. I'll have to say. I won't tell you what kind of hot, but it's a hot.
Well, I feel
contender.
somewhat redeemed that I at least you maybe appreciate the film a little bit more than you did when we started recording.
I think that's probably fair.
Okay.
A little bit more. So yeah, you've won me over.
Nicolas Cage for the win.
my
Yeah.
gosh.
So, anyways, that's Vampire's Kiss. Feel free to in the comments leave if you liked it or didn't like it, or if you think this is doing something profound and Shakespearean,
Or if we've just convinced you never to watch this film and we've taken the hit for you.
Yeah, that's
just
fair
put that
too.
in the comments as well.
anything else.
I do not have anything else to say about this film.
Okay. Woohoo! Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the aisles.